They've declared this war over 4 times now. June 2025, over. February 2026, back to war. April 2026, over again. June 19th, 2026, signed, sealed, over for a 4th time. And in the 48 hours after that 4th signature dried, Israeli jets were still bombing Lebanon. A government minister went on record saying his country isn't bound by the deal his own ally just signed, and the Israeli prime minister hadn't even seen the full text of the agreement before it was finalized. So, is this war actually over, or are we about to watch ending number 5 collapse exactly like the first 4? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand something most news coverage isn't telling you. This was never really a 2-party conflict. It's a 3-party conflict where 2 of the parties, the US and Israel, aren't even agreeing on what they signed. Let's get into it. Section 1. What just happened? The event. Let's start with where things stand right now, because this story has so many moving parts that if we go chronological from the beginning, you'll lose the thread. So, present tense first. On Sunday, June 14th, 2026, Donald Trump announced that the United States and Iran had reached an agreement to end the war. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Kazem Garibabadi, confirmed the text was finalized. Trump's reaction on social media focused almost entirely on one thing, the Strait of Hormuz. He said it would reopen toll-free and that ships should start your engines. The formal signing was scheduled for Friday, June 19th, in Geneva, timed right after the G7 summit Trump was attending in France. But here's the first twist. There was no Geneva ceremony. Instead, on June 17th, Iran's government confirmed both sides had signed the Memorandum of Understanding electronically. No ceremony, no handshake, just signatures sent through diplomatic channels. Trump did physically sign a copy that night at the Palace of Versailles, during a dinner marking 250 years of US independence. Footage shows him pausing before putting pen to paper, telling the room this was not easy. So, as of June 17th, the deal is legally signed. As of June 19th, when you're watching this, Israel and Hezbollah renewed their own separate ceasefire after a deadly flare-up in Lebanon nearly blew the whole thing up before it could even take effect. That's where we are. Now let's go back and understand how we got 4 endings deep into a war that supposedly ended a year ago. Section 2. The background. How we got here. To understand why this keeps collapsing, you need to understand it actually started over a year ago, and it has already ended once before. June 24th, 2025, after what's now called the 12-day war, the US and Qatar brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Trump announced it on Truth Social the night before it took effect. There was just one problem. Iran denied agreeing to it. Trump announced peace before Iran had even confirmed the deal existed. The ceasefire went into effect anyway the next morning, but it was rocky from the very first hour. Both sides accused each other of violating it before the ink had time to dry. That ceasefire held, barely, for about 8 months. Then, February 28th, 2026, it ended. Trump announced what he called major combat operations against Iran. The US and Israel launched coordinated strikes, not just military targets, but government and infrastructure sites. This is the strike campaign that, according to Wikipedia's tracking of the war, resulted in the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Note for you, verify the Khamenei assassination claim with an additional source before stating this on camera. It's significant enough that you want more than one citation, and if true, it's honestly a bigger story than the ceasefire itself, and might deserve its own video. Iran responded with missile and drone strikes on Israel and US assets in the region. This is the start of what's being called the 2026 Iran War. And this is the war that triggered the global energy crisis because Iran began choking off traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that roughly 20% of the world's oil and gas passes through. From here, the diplomacy starts, and this is where the whiplash really begins. March 30th to April 7th, 2026, a third round of negotiations, mediated primarily by Pakistan. This round produces a 2-week ceasefire, announced April 7th. April 11th-12th, 2026, talks move to Islamabad. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says a deal is just inches away, but he also publicly criticizes what he calls maximalist demands from US negotiators. No further talks get confirmed after that round. The 2-week ceasefire from April 7th gets extended open-endedly, but the US keeps its naval blockade on Iran in place until real negotiations conclude. And this is the moment that explains everything that comes after. Israel and the US say Pakistan's April agreement did not include Lebanon. Iran says it does. That single disagreement, does this deal cover Lebanon or not, is the fault line that's going to crack this thing open again and again for the next 2 months. Section 3. The Whiplash Month, June 2026. Okay, now we're caught up to the month where this really goes off the rails. I want to walk you through June 2026 almost day by day, because the speed of reversal here is the whole story. June 1st, 2026, Iran suspends talks with the US. Why? In protest of Israeli strikes in Lebanon, which Tehran says violated the ceasefire. Same day, Trump contradicts this publicly, insisting negotiations are continuing at, quote, a rapid pace. Behind the scenes, Qatar is working through the weekend trying to prevent a planned Israeli operation in Beirut from going ahead. By that evening, Trump claims he's had a productive call with Netanyahu and announces via social media that Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to stop attacking each other and that Israeli troops won't move on Beirut. June 2nd, 3rd, Iran hits back. The Iranian Navy claims it targeted a US Central Command facility. CENTCOM denies it. Iran says it also struck US bases in Kuwait and Bahrain, plus a vessel near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign minister goes further, saying publicly that the war will only end when it also ends in Lebanon, repeating that any ceasefire has to include a full Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon. Trump, meanwhile, says the US blockade on Iran's ports is the most powerful thing the US has, leverage in his words. June 7th, 8th. This is the worst flare-up in months. Israel and Iran trade their heaviest strikes since the talks began. Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, accuses the US of violating the ceasefire and says publicly he doesn't trust the American side. He frames it like this, and I'm paraphrasing his position here, that Iran isn't choosing between war and diplomacy. It's doing both depending on what the moment calls for. The same day, the commander of Iran's Quds Force says Iran will establish what he calls a security belt of resistance, stretching from the Strait of Hormuz all the way to the Bab al-Mandab Strait at the mouth of the Red Sea, meaning Iran is signaling control over not one, but 2 of the world's most important choke points. And in the middle of all this, Trump goes on a tele-rally for a Senate primary in South Carolina and promises total victory over Iran within 2 weeks. If that promise sounds familiar, it should. The original April 7th ceasefire was also supposed to be a 2-week arrangement. This is at least the second time Trump has used that same 2-week framing for this conflict. June 14th, the deal everyone's been waiting for. The US and Iran announced they've reached an agreement that will take effect Friday, June 19th. Pakistan's foreign minister confirms Geneva as the venue. Trump says the Strait of Hormuz reopens the moment it's signed. June 15th, and here's where you start to see the cracks before the deal is even signed. Within hours of the announcement, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, says flatly, Israeli troops will not withdraw from Lebanon, Syria, or Gaza, regardless of what's in this deal. He says they're staying indefinitely. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir goes further. Israel is not subordinate to the United States. Netanyahu himself says nothing publicly that day. June 17th, the deal is signed. Electronically, not in person. No Geneva ceremony. Trump signs a physical copy at Versailles that night. But on the very same day, NBC News reports something remarkable. The Israeli government says it was never shown the actual memorandum of understanding before it was finalized. Israel, the country that fought this entire war alongside the US, was cut out of seeing the text of the deal that ends it. June 18th, Iran's government, under its new supreme leader, formally approves the MOU in writing, while making a point of saying that talking to the US doesn't mean accepting American positions. Meanwhile, in Israel, a poll shows only a small fraction of Israelis believe their country actually won this war, and most believe Netanyahu's handling of the situation hurt Israeli interests. The same day, Israel kills at least 3 people in fresh strikes on southern Lebanon, just hours after the signed deal explicitly required an immediate end to military operations there. A senior Likud lawmaker publicly tells Netanyahu to say enough to Trump and to keep striking Lebanon with what he calls maximum force. June 19th, fighting between Israel and Hezbollah escalates sharply enough that it threatens to derail the whole US-Iran framework before it's even implemented. Israeli strikes hit the Bekaa Valley. Hezbollah strikes Israeli tanks, saying it's retaliating for Israeli forces pushing toward a strategic hilltop overlooking Nabatea. 5 Israeli soldiers are hurt. Lebanon reports 18 killed and 33 wounded since midnight. J.D. Vance reportedly cancels a planned trip. And then, late in the day, Trump personally calls Israel and asks them to agree to a ceasefire with Hezbollah. They do. Trump calls it, in his words, a little icing on the cake. Section 4. Why this keeps happening. The structural problem. Now here's the part most coverage skips, because it requires connecting dots across 2 months of headlines instead of just reporting the latest one. So let's slow down and actually explain why this keeps falling apart. This was never a 2-sided negotiation. It's 3-sided, and the 3 sides don't fully agree on what they're negotiating. Side 1, the United States, specifically Trump, who wants a deal, visibly, urgently. Watch his language across this whole timeline. Very well, rapid pace, total victory in 2 weeks, the deal is now complete. He has reasons to want a fast, clean win. Economically, the deal's framed almost entirely around reopening Hormuz and crashing oil prices back down, and CNBC reported oil hit a 3-month low the moment the deal was announced. Politically, ending a war he started is a stronger story than an open-ended occupation with no exit. Side 2, Iran, which has been remarkably consistent on exactly one point through all of this. Lebanon has to be included, or there's no deal. Iran's leadership keeps tying its own ceasefire to Hezbollah's situation, because Hezbollah is Iran's proxy and abandoning it would be a strategic and symbolic loss Tehran isn't willing to absorb. Even when Iran's new supreme leader signs off on the MOU, he pointedly says it doesn't mean Iran accepts the American position. Tehran is signing under its own interpretation of the terms, not Washington's. Side 3, Israel. And this is the side actually driving most of the instability in mid to late June. Israel fought this war as a full partner with the US, but by the time the deal gets done, Israel isn't in the room. The Israeli government says it never even saw the memorandum before it was finalized. Netanyahu publicly walks a strange line. According to Israeli reporting, he avoided directly criticizing the deal in conversations with American officials and reportedly called it a possible home run if Iran fully complies. But members of his own government, Katz, Ben-Gvir, are openly saying Israel won't be bound by it, and his own public, by large margins, doesn't trust this outcome or trust Trump to protect Israeli interests going forward. So you have an American president who wants this finished, an Iranian government that will hold the line on Lebanon specifically, and an Israeli government that is publicly split between a prime minister trying not to anger Washington and ministers who are actively trying to undermine the deal, including, according to one report, through a media campaign aimed at influencing pro-Israel voices in American conservative media to turn against the agreement. That's not a ceasefire breaking down by accident. That's a structural mismatch. Three parties who all signed onto different versions of the same outcome in their own heads. Section 5. What to actually watch for. So where does this actually go from here? A few things worth watching, and I want to be honest about what's speculation versus what's already visible in the pattern. First, Lebanon is the fuse, not Hormuz. Every time this deal has nearly collapsed, it's collapsed over Lebanon, not over the nuclear file, not over Hormuz. If you want to know whether this ceasefire holds, don't watch oil tankers. Watch whether Israeli forces actually pull back from southern Lebanon, because right now, Israel's own defense minister has said on the record they don't plan to. Second, watch Netanyahu's political position, not just his statements. A leader whose own public believes he mishandled a war, heading into elections this fall with a near-even race against a challenger, has every incentive to look tough rather than compliant. If domestic politics in Israel start outweighing pressure from Washington, expect more strikes like the ones on June 18th and 19th, not fewer. Third, the nuclear track is the part nobody's actually solved yet. Notice that the MOU explicitly punts the hard part, a 60-day window of technical talks specifically about Iran's enriched uranium stockpile and enrichment capacity. That's the part of this conflict that actually started it back in February. Everything since then has been about managing the war, not resolving the original dispute. If those 60-day talks go the way the last two rounds went, inches away, followed by collapse, this could escalate again right as the ceasefire window closes, likely around mid-August. Fourth, and this is more speculative, watch whether Trump's public tone toward Netanyahu keeps hardening. Multiple reports describe growing public criticism from Trump and Vance directed at Israeli officials, which is a real shift from the alignment we've seen for years. If Washington starts treating Israeli strikes on Lebanon as the obstacle to American interests in the region, rather than backing Israel automatically, that's a bigger structural story than this single ceasefire, and one worth its own video down the line. What I wouldn't do is bet on this being the actual ending. We've had 4 of those already, and the same fault line, Lebanon, caused at least 3 of the last 4 collapses. Until Israeli forces actually withdraw from southern Lebanon, or Iran decides it can live with a partial withdrawal, this is a ceasefire, not a peace. So, is the war actually over? As of right now, technically, on paper, yes. There's a signed memorandum. The Hormuz blockade is reportedly lifting. Iran says it's processing fast-track approvals for ships, and oil prices have already dropped. But technically, on paper, is exactly what we said in June 2025 and in April 2026. And the structural problem underneath all of it, 3 parties who don't agree on what they agreed to, hasn't actually gone anywhere. If you want me to keep tracking this, and I will, because this is exactly the kind of story that's going to keep generating new developments, let me know in the comments what you want covered next. The Lebanon withdrawal question, the 60-day nuclear clock, or Netanyahu's political survival heading into the fall elections.